All right, what's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to DenofTruth. It's your boy Tino. So today we got an exciting episode. This was meant to happen for a while now, but this year has been crazy. So today we got Pete. So Pete, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the people what you do?
Tino, first, thanks for having me on the show. Been a long-time listener, fan of the show, so I'm honoured to be here chatting to you.
Yes, sir.
Pete Stevens, I work for Spotify, Australia, New Zealand. I'm a senior editor there in the editorial team, taking care of our owned and operated playlists and finding best ways to serve our audiences and, represent different parts of the music culture through the Spotify platform.
Yeah, it sounds great. Look, I've seen what you guys have been doing, and especially on a grassroots level, I like the way that, Spotify has been able to pattern a lot of the incentives to artists on the grassroots. You know what I mean? Artists who are actually putting work. Because you can see, when artists share that I've been added to this type of playlist, or, people get very excited about that. So I've seen that. But how's your year been? How's your year been, Pete?
Crazy as it has been for everyone, yeah. I think, we were talking earlier, is about from March onwards, the whole world just turned upside down very quickly. But in saying that, it's been specific to the music industry. It's been good to see that the industry sort of banded together and found ways to elevate local artists as they go through this harder period. And in terms of what we're seeing on the audience side, like with music consumption and the like, it's still, it's some changing patterns, but it's still healthy, still strong. Still seeing, artists adapt to this climate and the way they release music and still reach their audiences during this time. So, the year's been bad in some ways, but great in some ways, and it'll be just interesting to see how it changes things moving forward.
Yeah, I think everything's completely changed now. I think, like you said, seeing artists roll different things out now. It's cool to see artists roll things out in more creative ways.
Yeah.
I think that artists now have the opportunity to, try different things and not being scared of the repercussions of what it is. Because everyone is at home. No one's got, like you were saying, no one's got anything else to do but be at the studio.
Yeah.
Try different things. So, that's cool. So talk about, you sort of talk about your childhood. Were you raised in Australia? Where were you raised?
Yeah, I was raised in Australia. Grew up in Bondi. When I was younger, it was very, very different to what it is now. It was like a bit more of a stronger community vibe, a bit more diverse. But I kind of as I got into the, part of my 20s where I moved out of home, I was still living around there. But now I'm found myself out in the inner west, been there for a while now. Feels like home out there now. So, it's great. But in terms of, as I was saying, back to Bondi, growing up there, it was, it was a cool time growing up, the years I did there, and good little sort of, scene and community.
Yeah.
That way, yeah.
What do you mean by community-based? How did your community sort of impact or change the way that you look at music and look at different things? How was your community?
Oh, specific to music?
Yeah.
I guess, it started just, having a lot of fellow music lovers around for starters, and just a lot of friends and a bit of a scene where we could go to shows from a young age. All ages shows were a bit more prevalent back then. And because it was close to home, it wasn't a big thing to be going to a show when you're 14 without,
Yeah.
But so, and that, I guess that helped me, because I was just music obsessed from a very young age, just grew up in a household where, my dad's got a massive record collection, and whenever he was home, he was playing music and talking about music. When he wasn't, my mum was playing the radio, and I was just absorbing it all. And then, so that sort of gave me the foundations of, understanding music and learning different things, but actually getting out there and experience it and talking to other people was really beneficial in, finding my own sort of path in music and, as an appreciator.
What were some of your early introductions to music? What were some of your early influences?
Specific genres or
Yeah,
just
genres.
anything?
Who were you vibing? If I could go back and talk to 15, 16-year-old Pete, well, what type of music would you have been listening to?
Well, starting off when I was a young kid, there's a very much like classic rock household. But then as I started discovering more music, I think in my teens, I guess like back then it was different because it was the physical, like there was no streaming. The physical format of music kind of like limited people in a way. So you had your punk kids, your metal kids, your hip hop kids, and just these different sort of groups where they just appreciate that one style of music. But because I just had this early obsession with it, I was like interested in what everyone was listening to and like absorbing, 1 minute I'm obsessed with hip hop, next minute I'm obsessed with punk. And I guess, I'd like to answer your question around 15 or 16 age. Around that time, that's when like West Coast hip hop was having its moment. Mm-hmm. So I was very into that. Through like skateboarding culture as well, I picked up on a lot of punk and things like that, a lot of grunge, because that grew up around like that. But yeah, and I guess the next big step after that was when I was like 16, I got a job in a record store. Okay. And that just opened everything up for me. Like it completely diversified my music taste in terms of different genres. Gave me access to everything. Like I was going in there, and I feel old saying this, but this was the time of like where you could still tape stuff. Yeah, so I'm going in there. I don't know about that. I'm going in there doing my shift and taping things that I'm picking up off the shelves while I'm working, and basically working in the record store to earn money to buy CDs from the same store, Yeah. And then through that, I just discovered everything, but specific to hip hop, that's the first time I came across 36 Chambers by Wu-Tang. Oh. That just changed like everything in terms of how I saw hip hop and music in general. Just like, I mean, so much has been said about that record that I could say here, but I guess it was just like, it had the hip hop that I already loved, but it also had that grimy like punk attitude that also I love from listening to punk. And it's like, it was funny actually in the record store. I'm like a bit ashamed to admit this, but like they wouldn't, around the time I found that, the manager introduced this rule where staff couldn't buy a CD if there's only one copy of it. Yeah. And I was like, there's just because they wanted to have everything on the shelves and make to the public see that we've got a broad range of music. And I was taken with that Wu-Tang record. I was like, I got to have this, so I stole it. But,
yes, sir.
But, I was 16. Sir. I was 16.
You had to get that Wu-Tang. I'm with you.
No regrets. Like, well, some, I don't like, want to condone theft, but yeah, it was just something that, and I couldn't stop playing that record after, and then got onto the solo projects, Jizza, Liquid Swords, Old Dirty, Return of the 36, all those albums just were my world for a while there.
Yeah, man. You sound like you really love music, man. That's what it sounds like to me. Like you just, and I think even being in music, man, it's not a lot of people are in love with music. Yeah. I think that's what makes, whether you work for, somewhere like Spotify, you work for a record label, I think the art always comes first. It's always that passion and that love for the music that comes first. And you can tell when particular people, that's something that they love. Yeah. But that being said, so, you working for a record label and you being fascinated by, music from such a young age, how did that sort of lead you to getting in a career into entertainment as you got older? Where did you sort of get into after the record label? So
the next steps were I finished school, didn't go to uni, just went straight to TAFE and did like this music industry course just as an intro to learn about different things like music marketing and, everything from setting up performances. It was quite like a multifaceted thing, kind of designed for people that were interested in the industry to find their individual path, I guess. And then I started working for this company that provided audio channels for Foxtel as well as like retail businesses, etc. Yeah. And that's when like my knowledge kind of opened up even more, because all of a sudden I went from working there part-time, working my way up after a few years to become the music director there. And it really opened things up, because all of a sudden I'm not just dealing with genres I'm comfortable with. I'm jumping from like programming the hip hop channel to like a country channel to like a classical channel to like a metal channel, and rapidly jumping between them. And there was a lot there. Like I had to like learn, like just purely just go off and research on the spot before I could program, just to have the right knowledge to program for the right audiences. Like, for example, it was around the time there was a bit of in the mainstream, there's a bit of a Latin revival in Latin music.
Mm-hmm. Aladdin.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
No, Latin.
Like Latin. I thought you said Aladdin for a second. I was like, what? Yeah, but Latin music, yeah.
And that wasn't music I was familiar with, let alone wasn't familiar with the language being spoken in the music, but had to go off and just learn about that particular music culture, what was coming up, what people were listening to. So just, like little learning curves like that helped me just develop my knowledge. And, on the side, the beauty of that was I could add things to my own personal taste and in my spare time, what I was discovering,
So that would have been an interesting experience working with different music genres. Were there any commonalities you found between all types of music genres?
Commonalities? It's hard to say. Like, I tried to almost avoid looking at commonalities between the genres because I wanted to look at them individually so they got the right amount of time and respect when it came to the programming of that music, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And how was the Australian music scene at that time? Because what year was that? Like, around what year was it?
Yeah, so that was early 2000s. So that would have been, like the music scene at the time, it was definitely like, from my view of it at the time, wasn't as strong as it is now, and there was still very much, like we do still see now, like there was a lot of like US culture informing everything. There was a strong scenes in like indie rock and the like. Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely a different time and like very internationally sort of focused. And that's because like, when you look globally, we are a smaller country, and the industry was reflecting at the time as a smaller local industry as well.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's like, even if you look at it now, it's like now we're starting to get a lot more international sort of intention.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get your perspective on this because now I feel as if we're at that point in time where it really doesn't matter if you sound Australian, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like people, there's so many different artists who come from so many different backgrounds, who are pulling so many different influences from different backgrounds and making that into their own sound. I think there's this common theme that people always talk about. If you're an Australian artist, you have to sound Australian.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, it's cool. I like hearing someone on the radio that sounds like me, but it's cool also to see, people from diverse backgrounds pull in those influences, and you can hear it from an artist's perspective. Because I think that's a big part of being Australian as well, being multicultural and having all those type of influences in the music. And I think that's why now it's getting it's gaining the traction that it's getting, because you have so many people from different backgrounds, whether that be Pacific Islander, whether that be Asian, whether that be African or whatever. You have so many different influences now making the sound. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think, I know I work for a stream company, so I'm obviously going to talk very positively about it, but I think streaming as it came on has also opened up a lot of sort of avenues for artists of what they're being influenced by and what they're referencing. So like, streaming comes out, the floodgates are open, music is accessible anywhere, and you've got some artists that have come up now that only, I was going on about cassettes and whatnot earlier, but they only know streaming, have always had that access. And I feel like that now they've had that access that is wide, they can be influenced from everywhere. It's making the music evolve a lot quicker, and it's definitely making music a lot more interesting because they're pulling from little parts here, there, and everywhere. And it's like, it really shows, like, and I mean, specific to local artists as well. Like, I think, like, all due respect to hip hop that came before the current wave, but I feel like that was very, like, speaking to the Australian culture and not, like, it was, but that was the time. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But now we live in musically a bit more of a global sort of society where there is opportunities for artists, no matter where they are, to sort of, not break in their own territories, but beyond. And I think a lot of these artists have met that happy medium specific to Australia, where they're still speaking culturally on a local level, but also on a global level. So they've found that nice balance where they can speak to where they're based and where they're from, but also open themselves to opportunities in other territories.
Yeah, I mean, and it's going off what you said now. It's like now you can just make a song right now, put it on Spotify, and just let it go.
Yeah,
and that's the cool part of it. You don't have to go through anyone else. You want to record something, get it engineered, boom, upload it into Spotify. You're going. You can touch millions of people, which is I think is a great thing now, because you give them. I think people feel like they have a lot more power. Through streaming platforms. They feel like they have a lot more power. They feel like they can go straight to their audience. And also it's just not even to bag out radio, but you don't always need to have a structure. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You don't always necessarily need to have, be on the radio and do those sort of things. Although it really helps, most definitely, getting your music out to different people. But if you know how to target your niche and you know how to target your market, that's all you have to do. It's you, streaming platform, and that's it. Yeah. Straight to market, which is cool.
And I feel like it's not, we don't have to be as narrow on streaming. Like we're seeing a trend recently with like what we call genreless playlists coming up, where it has, bits of hip hop, R&B, multitude of genres, and we'll put it, in a playlist format. And it's kind of like more of a vibe and more of a feel than a specific genre. And we're seeing a lot of trends move towards that in the way people are consuming music. They're like, because we don't want to be defined by a single genre, we want to have these spaces where we could discover a multitude of things,
Yeah. But that being said, so you went from being a music director, programming different types of musical shows. How did you end up working at Spotify? What was that progression?
The journey there? Well, it's like, I was at that company for a long time, but I used that as a base while I had a lot of side hustles to kind of learn more about the industry and different parts of it. Mm-hmm. So I did like band management for a time. I was like doing music journalism. I was doing a lot of consulting work for like licensing on films and ads and things like that. It was DJing as well. That was like another big step. I was kind of like, as I was saying, like around the early mid-2000s, there was that real indie boom. There's a lot of indie clubs popping up, one down the road, in fact. Yeah. So I was DJing there, but when that died down a bit, a lot of those clubs started pivoting back towards like hip-hop and stuff, and I remained doing that. And that kind of like, reignited. Like my love for hip-hop was still always there, but that reignited. I'm like, I think I, want to go down this lane. But eventually with that job, I was just like, okay, this is great, but I need to move on. And to be honest, I was looking for quite a few years to get a role, and it was just like a matter of like quite often coming close and being the person who just missed out. But I just kept at it because I thought if I'm constantly at these companies and showing my face, showing up to interviews, hopefully eventually the name rings out a bit. Yeah. And then eventually moved on to a company called Moshcam, where I was taking care of like doing live shoots. That basically the company, they used to film entire live sets and studio sessions and things like that. And they'd find different ways to get the content out there, YouTube channel, etc. But yeah, I was doing like all the artist liaison, producing all the shoots, doing all the content strategy and whatnot. Was there just for a short while, and then the Spotify role was advertised, and when they launched in Australia, I'd actually gone and been through a couple of rounds of the interview process to be the first editor in Australia. Didn't work out. This time it came up, I was like, there was just something, I was like, I have to get this.
Like, you gotta grind, like, this is it. Yeah, this is it.
So I just pushed to get it, and it was a huge, like over time, it's like a long interview process because they're looking for the right person, because it was only the second editor in Australia. Yeah. And it came along, and it was just like, it was totally like a slap yourself in the face moment. It was like, it's like, shit, I just got my dream job. Like,
yeah, I'm here. Yeah. Like, finally, I'm here. But you talked a lot about like, even in your past roles, you did numerous things, like, whether that be managing, DJing, working on the publishing side. What do you think was the importance of you doing so many different things?
Just to see, like, because you can stick at one part of the industry and just forever be in that part of the industry. But if you're out there and it's truly like something you personally want to do and have the knowledge across everything, and my like absolute love for music was driving me to be interested in all the mechanisms that make music work and what it is, because I had played in bands and stuff when I was younger, but I knew I was never going to be a musician, but I wanted to use my love for music to actually, work in that industry. So I just found my drive was just like just trying to be passionate about as many areas as I could to have that experience to help me find my own path. And then also in the future, if I go down one path but want to pivot somewhere else, I know that I've got a bit more of that experience to, and it helps you bring a lot to whatever path you're in as well, because you could think outside the square. And
I guess during that period of time, because even the way you described it, it made it look like it was really quick, but I can see that it was a long process.
Long time.
There was a lot that happened throughout that journey. But if you could go back in time and that time just before you probably got your job at Spotify, what were some of the biggest learning lessons that you learned before getting that role?
I guess whilst I did use that company I was at, programming music, as a base while I did other things, a lot of the roles I was losing out to were ones where someone had come in who had actually been working for some bigger name companies and jumped around a bit. I hadn't really jumped around. I'd stayed in the one spot with a bunch of side hustles.
Yeah.
So, but in saying that as well, I think the great thing with Spotify was they recognized that this guy done a lot. While he might have not worked for 5 major labels, the passion's there. And I hope people, when they're hiring young people in the music industry, do realize that everyone has to start somewhere. You can't just put out an ad and say we want a marketing manager, but you have to have all this. It's but the experience as well needs to happen somewhere. So it's good when you find these companies that have a balance of those roles. They don't always just go for high profile roles. They bring people in and develop and take on fresh perspectives and sort of let them grow within the role and contribute to the company.
I feel like that's where you get the most talent, because a lot of people don't, you can see a lot of people do numerous things. Like you said, a lot of people are doing numerous things and they're trying to get themselves out there. But how do you get 10 years of marketing experience when you can't get into a company that allows you to even get 6 months of experience, So it's
you can't just download an app and go, okay, I've got my experience.
But that being said, so after that, you then go into Spotify. What was it like getting to Spotify for you? After going through all of that whole journey, years of experience grinding, what was it like to finally get your dream job?
It was surreal, man. I know surreal is a strong word, because essentially it's just, at the end of the day, it's a job, but it was surreal in the sense that so much of my passion of music is having something that is what I do all day, every day, and get paid for it around being passionate about music. I was just wow, as I was saying before, slapping myself in the face. And I've recognized that Spotify is the company I wanted to be at. This was 3 years ago, when the profile had raised in Australia, and just the growth I've seen there since I've been there. It was just good to know I was starting somewhere there at their absolute, getting ready to that, just bubble,
Yeah, most definitely. And so how long ago did you start at Spotify?
3 years now,
3 years ago. And at that time, were there still all the different types of playlists? When did the playlists start coming in?
The playlist came in, I think it was a year or two before that. The company acquired a playlist company out of, pretty sure it was out of Sweden. It was out of New York, called Tunigo. Yep. I could be wrong there about the origin, but and they were using the Spotify platform, because Spotify, when it started, didn't have playlists. It was all about build your own playlist.
Yeah. No one's got time for that anymore.
Yeah. And then Tunigo were actually using the platform to curate playlists, and they sort of white labeled Spotify to use it on their back end. And so they were bought out by Spotify. Then their curation team came over, and then they built out in all the different regions. So they hired someone in Australia. So when I came on board, the playlists were sort of set, but they were very sort of the specific ones for each genre. It's not now we're just constantly building it out based on the data we're seeing and the strategies we have going on to build out from different genres. So when I started, there was probably one hip hop playlist, for example. Now we've moved out to a multitude that are growing, and we're at a point, different years we have different focuses. This year you're going to see a lot more playlist brands coming onto Spotify that we're kind of working on.
Yeah. And so for I know a lot of artists watch this, and a lot of people want to know how do you guys make the playlist? What is the process? Is it you got a whole team just listening to music consistently, or what is the process behind you guys assigning the playlist, and how do people get on the playlist?
So the beginnings of that is we've introduced a system. It kind of came on officially early last year, was where artists can use Spotify for Artists, which I can touch on that as well soon, to pitch their music. So they can submit it officially for editorial consideration. Then that comes through to a program we use internally, which gives us access to everything being released on any given week or in advance.
Yeah.
And we encourage artists to pitch as far as like get the song on in the back end and pitched as soon as they can, because the longer we can spend with it, the more likely we're to discuss it and find different homes for it in the playlist system. But the best thing about that system is it's something that we really needed to create like a level playing field.
Yeah.
As you were saying before, there's artists that just go out and drop and do it on their own. But then you've got your artists on a major label that are getting a lot of support. But we wanted to make sure there's a completely level playing field. So at the same time, I'm listening to a Travis Scott song, for example, who's, one of the highest tiered artists in the world. I can also have access to a young artist from West Sydney who's releasing their first song on Spotify.
Yeah.
And it creates that level playing field. Like, obviously, when I listen to the Travis Scott one, I know the audience is there and I'll have to treat it appropriately. But when I look at the young artist that's got no listeners at all, it's their first song, I look at it, I'm like, okay, where can we start this artist's journey on our platform,
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an editorial team of 3 at the moment, just listening to it is a lot of listening, but it's kind of something we've become conditioned to, so we don't treat it just like a process. We're actually critiquing each song. And it's also a global thing as well. So we know editors in different regions are going to be listening to what's coming out in their region, but we can also, through the system, we've got suggest things to them.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the short answer to how to get on a playlist is just like get the music in early, pitch it through Spotify for Artists, grow your audience on platform as well. You can utilize socials and things like that to direct people to your Spotify profile. You can use Spotify for Artists to grow your audience as well. So basically that's a tool we've handed to artists where it tells them where their audience is listening. So right down from countries to cities to towns, etc. They can see how people are listening to their music, whether it's coming from editorial playlists or it's organic. They can also use that tool to make, add their own playlists, like personal playlists to their profile and give their fans a reason to come and follow their profile and create activity around that. And the good part of that is the more activity that happens with their profile is the more likely they're already being considered for editorial lists, but we also have like those personalized algotorial lists.
Yeah, yeah.
So the more you're building your profile and, the sort of, user affinity is the word, I guess, you're going to be moved into those, like purely through an algorithm, into those playlists and be reaching fans of similar music, So you might have a drill artist from West Sydney, but they've got quite a lower profile. But someone who's out there listening to drill from New York a lot might all of a sudden start getting served this younger artist because they've come up with through their profile. Yeah. But the editorial specific playlist, we're making those decisions about what actually starts on the playlist. But once it's there, it's purely determined by the data. We look and observe data and follow what the activity is on the particular playlist that song's on and move it around appropriately, like whether it moves down, up the playlist. But there's still, like we're still making human decisions beyond the data because we want to make sure there's the right flow and things, that are happening in music culture are being represented in the right way.
Yeah, and it's what's really interesting me, and why I want to talk to you as well is I wanted to talk about the relationship now between technology and music.
Yeah.
Because even like what you just described, a lot of people they have no idea that that's the process behind it. I think a lot of people just think that they submit it and it's just a computer that sort of just allocates the music to different types of playlists, but especially with the technology that Spotify is using, where do you feel like the technology is moving towards music?
It's like, the easy answer is it's definitely becoming smarter, and it's like something like music that still needs that human decision somewhere along. I think it's working in tandem with that heavily. I'm trying to think of the right way to answer this. Working heavily in tandem with that sort of the human element, but also I think it's a great thing that something as powerful as music, and as we're talking about the floodgates of music being open through things like streaming, giving people that discovery element and like finding things from all parts of the world and centering them into like what a user personally would want on a one-on-one. So there's no one sitting there saying, oh, we've seen this user listens to this, let's push them that. The machine is doing it and working out their, taste. And also what we observe from the editor side when we're looking in a particular playlist and seeing the audience reactions, it's kind of like putting something on there, crossing your fingers and you're saying, all right, is this going to work?
You're just throwing it at
yeah. And then you just see the movements, and like, I just love the constant surprises that come with that, like following what people are actually listening to. And there's sometimes where you're like, this is a sure thing, put it towards the top of the playlist because we know this particular sound or artist has a history of working well, or this is a new artist that we know is going to just crack on here. And seeing that like not meet our expectations, but then at the same time seeing an artist we were kind of testing the waters with down the further end of a playlist being boosted up through the data, it's like pretty cool to observe.
Yeah. I think a community is a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think that's what I like about the playlist. I think the community that it brings, I think that the community it generates. I mean, like I said a little bit before, you see artists on Instagram sharing, I've just been shared on this playlist, I've just shared in that playlist, and you can generally see the excitement. And even with what's been happening throughout this whole week, especially with Black Lives Matter and the Indigenous protests, Spotify releasing an Indigenous-orientated playlist.
Yep.
A lot of people can tell that, all right, well, Spotify is dedicated to the community.
Yeah.
They're listening. It's not just a computer. It's actual people behind the scenes who are listening to the type of trends that are happening within music, but also what's happening, in their community, which is the Australian community. But what do you think your community is trying to tell you now? Like, especially when it comes to music and what's going on?
In what sense? Like through the...
through the playlist and through, the type of people who are following Spotify. What do you think your community is trying to tell you when it comes to, the type of music that's coming out or the type of content that you're producing?
Yeah.
What do you think that they want?
It's a great question, man. It's, I guess it's constantly evolving, and it's as the platform shapes things for that to be personalized towards them, to individual listeners. But when you think of it through the group lens of, what is everyone sort of asking on a wider scale, I think just more variety, more diversity in programming, in terms of like what genres are on offer. We were talking about the genreless thing before, like they don't necessarily want things pigeonholed down into like, that goes down this lane or this genre. They want like just a wide, because discovery is the key word, they want spaces where they can find lots of things, and also they want, when you do have to narrow it down, they do want trends and movements that are happening right now to be, spaces where they can find and discover that type of music, and the Indigenous playlist you raised, like we've got a series of those. There's like 3. They're curated by local Indigenous curators as well.
Okay. Yep.
And they've been on platform for a while, and we're using those using those isn't the right word. We're putting those out there just to make sure that all, parts of music culture and cultures within Australia are being well represented on the platform.
And that's a good thing, man. I think, like you said, community is everything, especially because Australia's an island. So it's just us. It's just us right now. So we're the community that we sort of gotta be targeting. And I've seen that, I like seeing organizations and brands target the community that, that they're living in, or target, or just listen to the people, just listen to the people and what they want to hear. But that being said, I know you talked about the playlist a lot, about discovery and putting artists on playlists with, for example, someone like Travis Scott, where he's going to do this many numbers. Yeah. But this is the first time artist, and, for someone who's been in the scene, probably 10 plus years?
Yeah.
10 years.
A bit longer.
Yeah, a bit longer. What do you think has been the reason for the growth in Australian music in the last 2 to 3 years?
I definitely say, again, not to bring it all back to streaming, but that availability of music and discovery, and how music can travel a lot easier now. Mm-hmm. So, an artist being added to a playlist that's curated locally will serve well here, and will spread further throughout our individual region, but it also has the ability to move throughout the world, Mm-hmm. So, for example, we've been strong supporters of Young and Lips from when he released his first single last year, and seen his growth on the platform. Recently, it was over a few discussions talking to the UK team about him, and then now he's in Who We Be, which is a big UK playlist, and he's getting some presence over there. Independent artist, working with his team, and he's traveled quite quickly through the platform. And I feel like that, and not just, not just talking specific to Spotify, all music platforms with that open access now and the ability for music to move so quickly has really opened up music scenes in individual countries, but on a global level.
Yeah, what you said is, especially about that whole independent thing, I think that's so true. I think now, just in regards to artists in general, I think everyone is sort of going towards that independent sort of lane, which means that a lot of independent artists, more so, they just have teams. Yeah. And a lot of the, especially in Australia, knowing a couple of them, a lot of the teams are just their friends. Yeah. They're friends who are, trying to sort of put the pieces together. So that being said, where do you think Spotify, what position do you think that Spotify plays in that whole trying to get an independent artist out?
We could easily could have just been a platform where music exists, and it's just like this kind of, faceless thing where users go in, find and discover music. But I know that a proactive decision was made from the word go that if we're going to have this platform, we also need something that serves the artists and helps them understand their audiences and how they can grow through the platform. So things like, talking about before, Spotify for artists and the pitching tool and everything like that. I think that is opening up opportunities for artists, whether they're independent or they're on a major. As they're saying, we don't sort of differentiate between who's indie, who's major. At the end of the day, it comes through this portal where we hear the music, and the music comes first. We're talking about passion for music, and I know they hire editors there that have that true passion for music. When I first started working in music, I was like, okay, I can't play music or be a musician. Yeah. Well, that's not going to happen. But if I do work in music, I never want to get to the point where it's treated just like a product, Yeah. At the end of the day, it's down to the art form, and it's all about the artist first. That's everything else comes secondary. It's the art, it's the artist, it's the song, it's the passion that came behind it.
Where does your passion come from? Because even you saying that, I felt that passion right there. Where does it come from?
I don't know, man. I'm just music's just something you can't, it's not tangible in the sense that you can, everyone feels something different from it. You can't describe that feeling, but it's just something that seems to drive me, and it's not just I think from an early age as well, talking back to my dad with his record collection, we used to have this thing when I was a kid, and we'd be listening to music in the car, and he'd just be quizzing, he'd be going, what's this? What year did this come out? And all of a sudden I had the feeling and the love for music, but also I just wanted to know everything about the history of music cultures, things like that. So I guess when it becomes something more than just something you listen to while you're working out or you're at home or whatever, and when it becomes something that you're truly passionate about in terms of history, culture, stories and things like that, it just becomes this all-encompassing thing that can consume you, you know, like but in a good way.
Yeah, most definitely the passion there. So, you know, where do you, so even talking about the passion and talking about, you know, dedicating your life to there, what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen a lot of people make trying to get into, for example, the music scene or the business side of things?
I think your mistakes can only make you stronger.
Yeah.
And sometimes a mistake can end up being the new way forward, you know?
Yeah.
Like not everything has to be so conventional. So I think I'd actually encourage people to go out and make mistakes in a way, like, because you learn from those experiences, but also it's kind of experimenting and taking different steps is, you know, can lead on to great things. But in saying that, like, advice would be, is just like, don't rush. Everything's a slow game. Like and if you play out that slow game, good things come at the end. And I know that's easy to say that kind of conflicts what's happening now where things are so rapid.
Yeah.
But that's also just a sign of the times where as things have opened up, but don't, just don't run into things too quickly. Be very strategic. You know, as we were talking about before the podcast, when we were talking about artist plans and things like that, always look forward as well. Like it's easy to jump on a trend or something that's happening in this very moment, but also have strong foresight to know what's coming in the future, because things, while they are moving rapidly, are going to come and go as rapidly. So you need to be prepared for the next step.
Yeah. But talking about the future, you know, is there anything that Spotify is, you know, starting to prepare to roll out, you know, moving forward? That you can talk about?
I can't really comment on features and things like that. And to be honest, sometimes that happens so quickly that we hear about it just as it's about to launch. But on a local level, like, and specific to music culture here and whatnot, like we've just, as you know, and I'm sure you were there last year as well, we did the A1 Live.
Yeah.
We're building A1 as a brand now, as well as just the playlist.
Cool.
It's recently had a nice slick redesign. We've gone out, it was on Tuesday it actually launched, and by the time this podcast goes there, that could be any time, but
it might be out.
We launched the new look and feel, taken away the A1, the hip hop out of it, not the style of music, but out of the title. So it's just A1 now. It's got a slick new look. We launched it with Young and Lips on the cover, but we're also doing a social media and an out-of-home campaign. So that'll involve, we got shout-outs from artists like, from international and local. So we managed to get DaBaby to shout out A1, ASAP Ferg.
That's dope. Joyner
Lucas and a bunch. But we're doing, putting these videos together. We've also got local artists like Hefs, Jess B from Auckland, Sampa the Great, whole bunch of artists that have been on the A1 playlists, like NME from Brisbane, Day One from Brisbane. And the idea of these content pieces it represents what A1 is about as well, where it's like a global sort of playlist, but pushing local culture through that. So A1 could quite easily be all local artists, but we want to represent what people are listening to through this like global lens, you know? Yeah. So you have a song by DaBaby followed by a Hef's track, you know?
Yeah.
And giving a space for these local artists to be sitting amongst the music that's, you know, way much bigger globally and building their stories through that. So we're having these content pieces represent that. And we've also got billboards and street posts out at the moment. Like Young and Lips is up on a billboard. Day One's on one in Brisbane.
That's lit. You know, for a lot of people, you know, being on a billboard, that's a big deal for a lot of people, you know, like, but how do you think that's been received? You know, how do you think that's been received by, I guess, the audience having, you know, international acts, big international acts and domestic acts? What do you think the reception has been?
When I started at Spotify, like I took on A1 straight away, and that was 3 years ago, man. And it was still like this new school happening now was still like, and it seems like such a short time ago, but it's still kind of fresh. I came on and I was like, I looked at A1 as it stood and I was like, it's heavily American.
Yeah.
You couldn't even get a UK artist on there. Like around that time, Stormzy released his record and like it was a big internal push to make it happen in all territories.
Yeah.
Just wasn't being well received. So I was like, okay, something I want to do with this is make this not as US, like keep the US artists in there, but not just the US centric, because then it's just like a local version of a rap caviar. It's the same thing, you know? So my aim was to get as many local artists in there as I could, but as long as the audience was receiving them well. I think like around that time, it was, as I was saying, it was still fresh. Like it's when I first came across Manu, as in Manu Crooks. And he was one of the first artists, and I'm like, okay, this is someone, and we're talking to those artists before that are speaking locally and globally. I'm like, this is someone doing it right here. So started researching, seeing what was going on in different scenes, reaching out to teams, etc. And over time we built it. And at that time when I started 3 years ago, like Manu might have been the only local artist in there. But now I was looking at recently the top 10 songs, 6 or 7 of them were Australian-based acts, you know? So it's come a long way, and we're seeing like the industry and the, you know, hip hop on a local level has come a long way, and we're seeing that reflected through A1 heavily, and also like going back to the UK thing, finding spaces for those artists there as well, especially for the fact that a lot of local artists here don't necessarily look straight to the US anymore. They're looking at the UK hip hop culture that's happening over there, and the way that has kind of like how strong the scenes are and how it's also infiltrated the mainstream over there. You know?
I've always had this. I have this weird theory in my mind, and this, I'm not sure if this is like a conspiracy theory for music or something like that. But I've always had a feeling the reason why Australians gravitate to music in the UK a lot more is because of the accent.
That's another thing.
For some reason, that's my theory. I think it's a bit more relatable.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, look at the history. If you look at the histories of both countries, look at sort of the demographics in regards to being very immigrant based.
Yeah.
I think that's why people gravitate to the UK more than, for example, America. Right.
Totally.
But that's just the theory.
No, I like it, man.
Yeah. But look, that being said, look, for artists wanting to get on the playlist, for artists wanting to reach out to Spotify, what do you reckon is the best way for them to do that?
So basically, as I was saying before, set up your Spotify for Artist profile. It's simple. Like it's not a process to set up. It's basically as soon as you have music ready to release, it's there for you to go, and you can tweak it as you see fit, but the data comes to you through there. Once that's done, pitch the music, because we are hearing music in different ways. We're meeting with people. We do get sent things, etc. But at the end of the day, all our listening happens on that portal.
Yeah.
So if it's pitched in the right way, and by the right way, I mean all you basically is to need to put where you're based, what genre you are, and put a few notes about it, and we can do the rest, you know?
Yep.
But in saying that, like, we're not a big faceless corporate company. The door's always open there, man. We have, you know, meetings with artists. We have contact with artists through email, and we're not working on a process of pitches the song, it makes the playlist, goes through the system. We want to know, like, artists, Spotify for one wants to be a part of the artist's story and help them grow, and, you know, whether it be from the early stages or established artists, but we want to hear the artist's stories and what was inspiring the music, and know what they've got coming up, hear about rollout plans, all that sort of stuff. So the door's always open at Spotify. I've actually, like, editorial that I work in is part of a wider music team, and the other half of that is a team called Artists and Label Partnerships, and they're actually out there talking to the industry, hearing what's coming up, answering questions, and also looking at ways like, so to get things off the ground, like when I was talking about the A1 billboards, or et cetera, they execute things like that. So they're looking at ways to promote artists and their releases, not just on the playlist, but through on-platform tools and out-of-home stuff, through socials. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, Pete, I hope everyone gained that. Make sure you reach out to Spotify. Make sure, you do what's right. But look, Pete, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Appreciate the talk.
Thanks for having me, Tino.
Yeah.
I was again honored to be on here, man. I'm stoked.
I'm honored to have you on here too, man. It's good. I feel like these conversations need to happen a lot more often. I think, even people seeing your face, people probably think that you're so far away, that this Pete guy from Spotify, I will never be able to, reach him or meet him. And just having you on here where people can watch it and they can realize, no, this is a real human being. And if you communicate in the right way, you can get on a great platform for you to, express your art.
Yeah,
so, it's great. But look, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. And thank you.
Thanks, Tina.
All right.
Awesome.